Good afternoon, everybody. Glad you could join us for this special announcement. We're going to take just a few moments and let people get online here. Hopefully you can hear me okay today. I'm trying out a different mic again, seeing our different options that we have to work with. We'll take just a couple of minutes and let people get online. I realize it was a short announcement. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. You might want to send out a couple of reminders maybe and some of your contact lists. Get as many people on here this afternoon as possible. Of course, this will be archived on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube channel for later viewing if people miss it live. Okay, we're going to give it just about 2 more minutes here. I see a number of you are still clicking on. Give you a minute or two here yet to send out some reminders to your friends list. All right, we're going to let ourselves go here another minute or so to the end of this song, and then we'll go ahead and make our special announcement today. If you haven't already, please contact your friends, church family that you don't see on here, and advise them to jump on Facebook and view our live stream announcement here this afternoon. All right, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon for this special announcement. Let me lead up to it with just a reminder of our live stream this Sunday morning. Start at 10:20 with some pre-service, and then 10:30 we'll begin the service. And we're going to be taking a look this week, because it's Mother's Day, at some powerful, influential, godly women in God's Word that we can all learn from. So I encourage you to be here for that. Also want to remind you of our Wednesday evening praise and worship hour. We've really been enjoying this, and quite a number of you have been giving quite positive feedback and just thoroughly enjoying the worship time. And it doesn't take the place of being together, actually being together. The flat screen is not the same as real life, but for right now, it's filling in that void and that gap. And we encourage you to invite others to join us on Wednesday evenings as well. Also, Sunday evenings at 6, I've been doing, and this doesn't mean that series where we're taking Bible verses that are often taken out of context and putting them back into God's context. Now, traditionally, we do not have evening service on Mother's Day, Father's Day, and some other holidays during the year, and we will continue to follow that pattern. So there will not be a Sunday evening live stream this week on Mother's Day. We encourage all of you to spend some time with your mom, if at all possible, and enjoy the day together as a family as much as possible. So we have been sharing now for a couple of live streams about a special announcement, and today is that special announcement day, and it concerns when we will be resuming physical services here at Calvary. And I'm going to get to that in a few moments, but there are some things that I need to explain, discuss, and share with you. And believe me, there is a ton of material information. I'm going to try to be as thorough and yet concise as possible. I do not want to belabor this announcement. And I'm not going to wait till the end, so it's a big long teaser, that kind of thing. So I'm going to let you know immediately and up front, and then I'm going to go through some explanation of some reasoning and process and procedure and policy that we're going to be following. We will be resuming Sunday morning service only here at Calvary for those who would like to attend in person, beginning on Sunday, May 17th, for the morning worship hour. We're going to have special policies and procedures in place. I'll go over those details when we get to the end of this announcement. But I want you to know right up front that we are going to start resuming with Sunday morning service only, Sunday, May 17th, beginning at 10:30, for those who want to attend in person. We're going to continue to live stream, so that will be available as well as a ministry resource. Now, there are a number of things that I want to go over and discuss, and there are far too many. If I went into all the detail, this would be hours, like multiple hours long of explanation. Believe me, I've spent much time in prayer and working through documents and meetings and information and details and resources, going over things and trying to be as thorough and accurate and as informed as possible when coming to this decision. Ultimately, I believe personally as a pastor, it's a spiritual leadership decision when it comes to the church. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. One of the things that has often been brought up from a number of ministries, pastors, and myself as well, as I've considered it, is the Bible verses that specifically mention obedience to government. And I think it's important that we at least touch on these. I'm not going to take the time today to go through all of the details and the unique context that these are in. But I do want to touch on them for just a moment. So Romans 13, 1 through 5, I'll read through this, and you have it there on the screen. Hopefully you can see it. I didn't want to make a whole lot of PowerPoint slides, so I tried to get it all in one slide. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for the rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. And in 1 Peter chapter 2, another one that's very clear, therefore submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, and honor the king. Now, those are the two most explicit. We're also told in Scripture to pray for those in authority, pray for those in what we see as elected positions, and governors and presidents and cabinet members and representatives and senators, and we need to do that. We need to be praying for them. And we need to be responding to current situations in Christ-like love. But we also need to take into account that there are limits to obedience when government leads in a direction that is against biblical principles. And we don't have time to go into all of those during this announcement. I just think that that's something that's important to address. So let me share with you just one quick resource that I would encourage you to go read. I'm also going to say at this point, at some time during my This Doesn't Mean That series, I will be addressing those particular passages. In fact, it probably will be the very next passages that I deal with, since it is such a crucial subject right now in the situation and circumstance that we're dealing with in our country and with our church ministries. So I would encourage you to Google BeliefNet and look up this title, The Limits of Obedience. The Limits of Obedience, that address Romans 13 in particular, and then touch on the Peter passage as well. I'd encourage you to go there. I'm going to give you just a couple of brief examples in Scripture. I want you to think with me for a moment of Nathan, the prophet of God, who respected David as king, but it didn't stop Nathan from confronting David's sin, even though David was the king. And that was not disrespectful. It was being truthful and honest and being obedient to God as the supreme authority. I think also of Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego, and oftentimes these are brought up as, see how they lived under ungodly regimes, and they did, and they followed the laws of the land, and they did for the most part. But I want you to remember also that they suffered the consequences of the lion's den, the fiery furnace, things like that, for the very reason that they didn't obey the ruler when the ruler made laws that were against the way that they were to worship. They believed that God was leading them to worship. It was not disrespectful to them. It might have been disobedient to those particular injunctions, rules, laws that were enacted. And so we need to take those kinds of things into account within their context. So I don't want to belabor all of that point. I'm going to delve into that in probably the next This Doesn't Mean That, and get a little bit more explicit in how this relates to us. I realize that God is sovereign over all things, and his ultimate plan will not change. God finds purpose, creates purpose, designs purpose. His will not be thwarted. However, inside the parameters of his will, within his sovereign will, we are allowed choices. God gives us choices. We see a lot of those oftentimes in the Old Testament, where we have passages that we call those if-then. If you do this, then this. If you do right things, then blessing will follow. If you do wrong things, judgment will follow. There's a free will to choose. So without getting off on a political sidetrack, I just want to point out the fact that oftentimes God allows ungodly rulers to reign, I believe, in my opinion, because many times Christians don't get out and vote. And that is just a plain, simple fact. If we get out and vote for godly people, and I mean by and large, I did a poll one time many years ago. I did a poll of how many professing Christians attending on a particular Sunday morning actually voted. 24%. That's an if-then. Now, election's coming up. That's my little plug for get out and vote. Folks, we got to get out and vote. We have to be involved. We need more Christians running for office, for positions, for governor, and all these other political positions, local, state, national. We need more Christian people. We need to vote for people who have biblical morals, principles, and standards. Okay, personal rant. I'll admit that. Let me get back on track here with our announcement. So, I want us to understand something that I believe is a very confused matter. We understand that in most states, not all, in our state, there is a stay-at-home order in place. Now, it's being adjusted, and some counties are in the yellow, and some are in the red, and some are being moved quicker than others for whatever reason or rationale or the lack thereof. But I want us to understand something. From the very beginning of the stay-at-home order, churches were exempt and still are. This has been reiterated in multiple government state government resources. You can find this information on your own. Churches are exempt from all of the stay-at-home mandates, rules, and regulations. I've gone over them and over them. I've found different resources. I've been in contact with Liberty Counsel, Christian Law Association, multiple pastors, some political figures, countless resources. So we need to understand, and I have this up on the PowerPoint, the stay-at-home order has no effect or influence on churches. They are exempt from Governor Wolf's stay-at-home order guidance fact sheet. And I have it right here in front of me, right? Pages of it. Particularly on pages 2 and 3. It explicitly states churches are exempt. It also states, nothing in this policy shall be construed to affect the operations of, and then later on down it says, religious institutions. I don't particularly care for that phraseology, but it's a government document. From Pennsylvania Health Secretary Levine, we have made no requirement for churches not to meet. They put no restrictions on churches meeting. So churches doing so have been voluntary. Also from Secretary Levine, this is from a conference call, Zoom meeting, whatever, recently that some pastors were in. We recommend wearing a mask. We do not require a mask to attend a service. Additionally, there are no guidelines for churches to follow pertaining to the amount of people that come to services. Now, there is a lot of confusion over the impact and influence or responsibility to this stay-at-home order. So, when this originally started, when this originally came onto the scene, and the stay-at-home order came out and everybody was concerned, and we still should be concerned. And I want to say also in this kind of rambling announcement here, unfortunately, that this is not something to be taken lightly. It should be taken seriously. Precautions put in place, guidelines followed within reason. And so I want us to understand that we are not, by saying that we're going to resume service, Sunday morning service on May the 17th, in any way are we making light of this situation or those who have been stricken by this illness or even those who have lost loved ones or family members and friends because of this terrible virus. But I want us to understand that we see this as a serious matter, but we also take our worship and our following Christ as a serious matter also, and just the church gathering together as the body. I'm going to go through the details that we're going to follow as a church in the upcoming weeks ahead and explain some of these things. But let me just share a couple of things with you. One thing in particular is an illustration. So this week on Tuesday, I drove out to Lowe's to buy birdseed. Okay, we have some birds in the backyard, and they come in, some finches and things like that, and we were running low. So running low on seed, I went out to Lowe's. When I pulled into the parking lot on Tuesday afternoon, or Tuesday morning, the parking lot was packed at Lowe's. Now, I know it's one of the essential businesses deemed essential for whatever reasons. The parking lot was packed, and I thought, well, this is interesting. So I actually started counting cars. I got up to 200, a little over 200, 220, somewhere in that neighborhood. I thought, well, this is ridiculous. There's got to be close to 300 cars in this parking lot. There has to be. And that's not counting the cars that were in the employee section or over on the far side. So there was conservatively 220 cars. So I walked into the building. When I walked into the building, everyone was wearing their face mask, as I was, being respectful of the regulations that are put on businesses. I put the mask on. And so I went in, and there was nobody there checking to make sure you had a mask on when you entered the building. There was nobody there taking anybody's temperature. And there were a lot of people. I started counting people, too. I got up over 100, and I thought, well, I'm not doing this either. But I was just curious, and in my estimation, as I walked through the building for a while, just observing, I wanted to see what people were doing, how they were behaving, how they were acting in this environment. My guess is if there were 220 cars there, there were at least 300, 350 people, and that's probably on the conservative side. So let's say over 300 people in that facility at one time. And I watched. I saw a family, presuming a family, looking at some patio furniture. I saw another, look like a family, husband, wife, something like that, looking at a grill. Another group looking at flowers and putting them in a cart. I walked around and saw people just doing shopping in Lowe's like you would do. Quite a number of them, the vast majority, were not spacing out at 6 feet. Kind of hard to do in some of the aisles and those kinds of things. My point is this. Why is it deemed okay, and it's not looked at as in a negative way, to go out to Lowe's among 300 people to buy birdseed, and that's okay, but to lead a church in worship in a group somehow isn't okay when we are going to follow the same regulations or protocol for safety procedures. So we're going to proceed with resuming service, and I realize that not everyone's going to agree with that. I respect your decision or your choice and how you want to deal with that, and how you choose to look at that. But I do want to say that as a pastor of this church, as I've made this decision and come to peace in my own heart, I have peace in mind that this is the right decision for us to do at this time under these guidelines. We're not being careless about it. We're not being frivolous with health or safety or concerns for others. That's not in it. And we're not being inconsiderate of our community. We're following the same guidelines that anybody would follow if you go into Sheetz and among a crowd of people and want to buy hot dogs. And so we're going to be implementing these policies and procedures for the foreseeable future and asking everybody who does attend to abide by them and follow these precautionary measures that we're going to be implementing. Okay, so here's, let me check one more sheet there. Okay. So here's the guidelines that we're going to be following. Until further notice. Now this is, I want to remind you, we are doing Sunday morning service only. No other ministries, no transportation ministries or anything like that. Sunday morning, beginning May 17th at 10:30. So we want people to, when you come, whoever comes, observe social distancing. Now, I didn't get a chance to measure the actual square footage of our auditorium. If you're familiar with our main auditorium, you realize it's very large. We can seat 1,250 people on the floor alone and another 350 in the balcony if we would ever need it. That's 1,600 people. So the best I can remember, from front to back, it's about 150 feet, maybe more. I'm not sure, somewhere in that neighborhood. 150 to 170 feet, something like that. And I believe 90 to 100 feet across. That's a lot of square footage. So we can easily social distance in our auditorium. I believe there are 80 pews, and they are all long, like 20 to 25 feet long. It is very easy for us to social distance, more so than in many businesses that are permitted to be open. So we're asking people to observe social distancing. You will be reminded of that should you choose to attend on Sunday morning, May 17th. Individuals will be stationed at each of the main auditorium doors to open the doors. Here's what I'm asking you to do. You're going to need to come to the front of the building where the pillars are. We're going to have entrance through one center door. There will be a door tender there that's going to open and close the door, so no one who is coming and going, no one's going to need to touch the door. One person will do that, the door tender. So you will not be touching anything when you come through the door, person after person after person. So there's less contact, one person. If you do need to use the handicapped entrance, that entrance will be open also on the east side of the building, and there will be a door tender there as well. So encourage you to use either one of those entrances, but please wait for the door tender to open the door for you, whether you are entering or exiting. Those doors will be manned. So please respect that. We're asking you to refrain from all handshaking, all the Christian hugging and all of that's got to wait for another time. Do a wave or an air handshake, whatever you want to come up with, but eliminate that contact. Oh, and by the way, the entering and exiting through particular doors, limited to particular doors, helps us in several things. Obviously, it eliminates multiple contacts on the doors, but it also eliminates multiple doors needing to be sterilized all the time. In light of that, we will be asking everyone to use the restrooms in the Welcome Center only, not in the educational wing. We're asking everyone who attends for Sunday morning worship, starting on May 17th, that you remain in the main auditorium, and unless you have administrative responsibilities, refrain from going to the educational wing. That will help us contain any kind of contact and the need for sanitizing, all of that kind of thing, disinfecting to particular areas. It's going to help us mitigate spreading anything, potentially spreading anything. So use hand sanitizer when entering and exiting. And we're able to purchase a number of those on top of what we had. There will be multiple hand sanitizer containers sitting around in various places at the doorways, Welcome Center, in the main auditorium. Use them. We're encouraging everyone to use them. Offering plates will be placed stationary and will not be passed through the congregation, and we will not be passing the communion trays. We've not come up with a means or a method yet to facilitate the Lord's table, but we'll come up with something eventually. But for now, we're not going to be passing anything. We're also asking you to refrain from, now, of course, we haven't been picking up the hymnals. Everything's on the PowerPoint and everything. But the hymnals and the pencils and all of those things that are in the pew racks, just refrain from, those things being handled. It is advised, but not mandatory, to wear a face mask. There are those who have anxiety issues, claustrophobia. There are those with COPD who have respiratory problems and things like that. Even in the stay-at-home order, you are precluded from observing that regulation. And so you are advised but not mandated to wear a face mask. We do have a supply of face masks here. If you come and you forget or whatever, you'll be able to pick up one here. Also, it is strongly advised that you do not attend if you are in any way immune compromised. Now, most of you are aware that my wife is going through chemotherapy right now, and she is very immune compromised, and she hasn't been attending, and she will not be attending in person. She'll be one of those who will be joining us, continuing to join us on live stream. So anyone immune compromised to any degree at any level, you should not attend for your own safety. We strongly recommend that you do not attend if you recently had or are currently running a fever. Now, only you know that, but we advise you not to attend. Also, if you've recently experienced or are currently dealing with any type of infection, do not attend. If you have recently been ill, within the last week or so, any kind of cold, infection, nausea, those kinds of things, we would advise you do not attend. If you have a medical condition such as asthma, diabetes, or any kind of a heart condition, then we advise that you not attend. These are simple precautionary things that are in place. So we are voluntarily, as a church, following guidelines that we are not mandated to abide by, but we are coming alongside of those in our community who are mandated and say, you know what, we can follow these guidelines, and yet we can still meet together for corporate worship. And so we are beginning Sunday morning only worship service. Again, I want to reiterate, Sunday morning only, beginning May 17th. We will not be having Kidtricity. We will not be having nursery. We'll not be having junior church. There will not be toddler church. There will not be youth ministry. There will not be van ministry. All of these things, all of these areas of ministry are on indefinite hold until we have some policies and procedures and protocols to control these smaller areas. These are all smaller areas, smaller environments that make it more difficult to follow along some of these protocol, these safety, health safety guidelines. And so we are setting all of those aside and continuing to hold them, put them on hold until we have better policy and guidelines to begin implementing. When we do begin resuming any of those ministries, it will be on a one-by-one basis. And trying not just opening up the floodgates and everything's back online and up and running, but one by one, the pastors, the deacons will be prayerfully discussing and meeting and talking about, okay, where do we go next? How are things going with the Sunday morning service? And then where do we go next with our services and ministries, and what do we implement next? So I'd appreciate your prayer for this area of ministry. I also want to mention just a couple pertinent, maybe random things. I've been in contact with quite a number of area pastors. We've had a number of phone conferences with upwards of 20, maybe more than that, area pastors. I do know that there are at least, as of this morning, at least 15 other area churches that are following the same principles and guidelines that I explained to you. A lot of this came out of this unity connection with the group of pastors that I've been having these conferences with. And so we are all following the same guideline. We're all making this announcement today. All of these other churches are mailing out. You'll be receiving a letter in the mail, by the way. It went out today in the mail. It's going to be posted. The letter is going to be posted on our Facebook page as well, so you'll see it in detail there. So we're all mailing out letters to our churches, our congregations today, and we are all making another formal announcement, not only today via live stream, but also then Sunday we'll be making an announcement during our live stream morning service, all of these churches as well. My guess is that there are probably a number of others that are doing the same thing. I'm already aware of, at least that I'm aware of, 4, 5, 6 churches that began resuming services a week or two ago under these guidelines. I don't know of any of these churches, and our church included, that have come to the conclusion, I don't care what anybody thinks, we're going to do whatever we want. That is not the attitude. And that's not the heart, and that's not the spirit. And so I want everybody to understand, on behalf of all the pastors that I'm aware of, this has been a very, very difficult and challenging season for ministry leaders, for pastors, struggling through all the variables and the responsibilities and the restructuring. I believe some of what we've experienced out of this is very good for us. I believe it's pushed a lot of us into some areas where we would not naturally go and have outreach opportunities in ministries that perhaps we never would have gotten involved in or would have been way down the road. I think it's created, at least I hope, prayerfully hope, it's created within the body at large a hunger and a desire and a newer understanding and appreciation for the uniqueness of the Bible's description of the church as a body. And a body with its parts torn apart cannot function. Not properly, not for long. The body of Christ, the local church, was designed and created and even illustrated to be joined together, to be fit together. I think it's helped us in many ways connect with other churches and also with our community, those unchurched individuals. And I think those are all very good and positive things. And I'm praying that as we begin resuming services, we don't just simply return to routine, but we grow in relationship. First of all with the Lord, and secondly with one another. So I look forward to joining you once again on this Sunday, Mother's Day, for our live stream, and then Sunday, May 17th, here at Calvary Baptist Church for our first service, physically gathering together for worship. I invite you to join us. If you can't or you choose not to do so physically, then I encourage you to join us live stream. And we'd love to have everybody, whether it's live stream or in person, just joining together to worship the Lord. Thank you for being patient through this rambling announcement. There is so much information involved in this. It's difficult to make it concise and yet feel doing it justice and explaining everything. So the Lord bless you all. Look forward to seeing you Sunday morning for Mother's Day live stream, and then here in person for those of you that choose to attend Sunday, May 17th at 10:30. Lord bless you all.